morning. Welcome to day 2 of Morning Fuel with the Driver, 7-day mini-series, Peacemakers versus Peacekeepers, or as I put in the title yesterday, Peacekeepers versus Peacemakers. One and the same, right? I'm excited that you've decided to join me on this journey, and I am hopeful, and I do believe there's going to be some information shared with you that's going to not only help you, but also someone else in your circle. So let's go ahead and dive right in. If you watch any of my videos for navigating life with a driver, you'll notice that I did mention that, hey, I am not one to talk off the dome. Sometimes I'll, what they say, when the confidence fully kicks in, I'll kind of go with it and, let it flow. But most times I got to have my little handy dandy notebook, as that one cartoon, because I ain't trying to endorse nobody, would say. So if you see me with my notebook, it's because I want to make sure that I am not forgetting important parts. But everything that I'm saying today is from the heart, from things I've looked up, things I've learned, things I want to share, things that I am yet learning. So let's dive right in. So day 1, the difference that most people miss. The difference that most people miss. So truth be told, majority of us are never taught how to make peace. Instead, we're taught how to keep peace. Maybe you agree with me on that. And as pointed out yesterday, those things, peacekeeping and peacemaking, are two totally different things, right? And it does us justice to know the difference. And so today I want to focus on, what is peacekeeping? What does that even look like? So here are a few things. Peacekeeping looks like staying quiet. It looks like letting things slide instead of addressing it, right, for peace sake. It looks like not saying what's really bothering you, just keeping it under wraps. You'll deal with it later on your own time, just for, again, peace sake, right? Avoiding conflict overall. Peacekeepers, they avoid conflict, right? Now hear me, okay? Being a peacekeeper or keeping peace is not a bad thing in itself, because there's a time and a place for it. If we look at the world that we live in, right, they all have methods, how they run their nations, how the United States does things, how our government does things, how people in position do things. They have systems in place to keep the peace, right? If you look at us personally in our everyday lives, interactions that we have with people that we may not know, we're out in the store, we're in public, things happen, we're driving. That's what I got to work on. We're working to keep the peace, instead of just creating unnecessary chaos everywhere we go, right? So peacekeeping in the right aspect is not a problem, but it's meant to be a temporary fix in majority of cases. Peacekeeping is even a great thing when it comes to our more intimate relationships, like family relationships, relationships on our job with our coworkers, relationships in our romantic relationships. I like that word for some reason. Even in our friendships, peacekeeping is a key piece, but alone, it can become a toxic piece. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. It was never meant to be this long-term solution of handling conflict, right? So just sit with that for a moment, peacekeeping. Because like I said, a lot of us was taught to keep the peace. And there's nothing wrong with keeping the peace. But nothing good comes out of it when you're using it, overusing it in a long-term, as a long-term solution. My words are not going with me this morning. Let me drink a little tea and see if that helps. All right, let's put that down. So if it's normal, if it's something that is useful, what's the issue then? You may say, what's the issue? Like, why do we need to know the difference between peacekeeping and peacemaking? It all brings peace, right? So I'm going to focus on the issue when it comes to those relationships that affect our everyday lives. I'm not talking about the ones you run into in public and things like that, but I'm talking about, again, with family, your significant other, your coworkers, Okay? These are people where peacekeeping is not going to be the end-all be-all answer for you when it comes to handling conflict, because conflict is going to come. Conflict is a part of everyday life. Whether you want it to be or not, unfortunately, we cannot get away from conflict, all right? But the way we handle it makes a huge difference. So when you use peacekeeping as a more permanent fix instead of temporary, you'll find yourself becoming a person that sacrifices their own voice. Think about it. You'll sacrifice your voice, and you'll begin to swallow the truth of what's really happening, what needs to be fixed, all in the name of having some false sense of peace, okay? That's what happens when you peacekeep, or when you're a peacekeeper. You maintain this fragile form of peace that can be broken very easily, right? So one of the main purposes of this 7-day series is really for us together to become more self-aware. Self-awareness is very important when it comes to any type of change that needs to take place. And the key word is self. So we're not diving in to try to diagnose anybody else, and but it's self. Like, how can I work on me? How can I better me? How can I make sure I'm serving myself in the best aspect? A form of self-love. Because if you don't know your damaging behaviors, then how can you really truly build your self-love and self-worth, if that makes sense? So I want to do a quick share. So I've always been a person that was always known and given pats on the back for being a peacekeeper, right? Someone that kept the peace. I didn't engage in conflict. That was just my role. And I was like, okay, hey, this is good. When people look for peace, they look for me, right? And people say, oh, you just have this peaceful spirit about you. You don't like to fight. You don't like to do this. You don't do that. You walk away from stuff. And to me, I was like, oh, I'm like, it made everything that I was put on the inside worth it, because, hey, I'm a peacekeeper, and they see that. They see this great superpower, this great attribute that I have, right? So not really fully aware at the moment that peacekeeping mentality was tied to another thing I like to call people-pleasing spirit, okay? And we're not going to get into that today. That'll be for another future, either Navigating Life with the Driver podcast, or maybe another Morning Fuel with the Driver series, who knows? But not recognizing that at that time, that part of that was attached to people-pleasing. And so I'm thinking, I got this thing together, I can handle any situation that comes, even if it makes me upset, I'll deal with it on my own time. But I'm all about avoiding conflict, and let's make this work, even at the own sacrificial of my own desires and feelings, right? So it was only until I got into a situation that peacekeeping just wasn't gonna do it, okay? And I tried to use all kind of peacekeeping techniques and everything, and I could never understand why this particular person would always get so upset with me and say, all you want to do is try to keep the peace. All you want to do. And it was like, okay, so what's so bad about wanting to keep the peace? Like, who doesn't want to live in a peaceful environment? And now years later, I realized what that meant. And while that person may not have had it completely hit on the nail, what peacekeeping and peacemaking, the difference was, now that I've kind of been learning some things, I realized, like, yeah, I was peacekeeping, and peacekeeping was causing more problems than it was solutions. And I had to realize that my peacekeeping not only harmed me, but it harmed those that were attached to my environment as well. So again, this is another reason why peacekeeping, learning the difference between peacekeeping and peacemaking is very, very important, because it doesn't just affect you. It affects those around you. Okay, and it sets off a whole, what's the word I'm looking for? That perimenopause brain, y'all pray for us. This mid-40s ain't no joke, but it's a whole cause and effect. We'll put it that way, in motion, So we know what peacekeeping looks like. Talking about self-awareness. How do you know if you're a peacekeeper? Maybe you may be wondering, like, okay, I hear you saying that's what peacekeeping behavior looks like, but I don't think that's what I'm doing. Or is that what I'm doing? So here are some characteristics I want to share today of what a peacekeeper is, or what they do. So just to make sure I get these right, I am going to look at my notebook. So of course, number one, a peacekeeper avoids all conflict. For whatever reason, they don't like conflict, they will find ways to avoid it. Peacekeepers will delay dealing with issues, whether they're big or small. Okay? Peacekeepers fear not being liked, and they fear having difficult conversations. Peacekeepers may only actually address the results of that conflict, but never address the underlying reason why the conflict started in the first place. Because it's uncomfortable to do that. It's uncomfortable to do that. Let's just deal with what happened now and fix that and move on, right? Peacekeepers, they strive to keep things calm so they can prevent any type of conflict from happening. Whatever it takes, let's keep the environment calm. Can't we all just get along, right? That's what peacekeepers do. Peacekeepers, we play it safe. We play it safe. Let's not rock the boat. Let's just maintain the status quo. And for those that may not be sure, status quo means that the way it is right now, let's maintain that, because this right here, this is giving peace. Yeah. I'm a little upset. Yeah, I'm feeling a little unheard. But if this is what peace looks like, I will take it, because any type of change outside of the norm may rock the boat and cause some conflict that I'm a little uncomfortable with, and I don't want to deal with that. And to me, that's not a peaceful environment when I have the mentality of a peacekeeper, right? And I'm gonna be honest, a few of those hit home for me. Some of those I have managed to work through. Some of those I am still working through. And what did they say in the church? If you can't say amen, say ouch. I said ouch a couple times. So that's the beginning of self-awareness, being able to say, yep, that's me. That's me. That's me. Yep. And that being said, even if you identify with one or two of those things on that list, it's worthwhile taking a look inside to see, is this peacekeeping behavior or am I being a peacemaker? So, okay. So you say, Danessa, you told me what peacekeeping looks like, what the characteristics of a peacekeeper is. And I want to say again, all these things are normal things and they're needed in certain aspects. And with that being said, you may say, okay, but what's really the issue, Danessa? If it's creating a sense of peace for the moment, then why not just let it be? Okay, so maybe I do have to sacrifice some things. Maybe I do have to kind of take a step back for the moment, but for peace sake, it's worth it. I just want peace. Well, sis, bro, you settling for a false sense of peace. And in actuality, there are long-term effects to being a peacekeeper. Both, like I said, they affect you and others. But today we're going to focus on what are the personal effects of long-term peacekeeping versus peacemaking. So, one, you start feeling like you're being taken advantage of. Anybody ever been there? Get upset, feel like people ain't really seeing and hearing you. They're not respecting you. They don't care about how you feel. They're just taking advantage of you. They know that, oh, that's docile Daisy, that's docile Dan. He's just gonna go with the flow. So he may not like it, but he's not gonna say anything. So we ain't worried about how he or she feel. So you start taking advantage of, because you feel like they're not really seeing me. Yes, I'm a peacekeeper, but hey, I know that bothers me. Being a long-term peacekeeper, guess what? No surprise, the real issues never get addressed, right? And things never change. Those things that you want to change, those things you want to see be better in your environment, they're never going to change, because you're doing peacekeeping. You're dealing with it from a peacekeeper standpoint. So it's not going to change. So you're in this cycle of frustration, wondering why things aren't changing, but it's because you're approaching it as a peacekeeper and not a peacemaker. And so when that happens, you're feeling overlooked, things are not changing, it starts producing things like anxiety within you. Yeah, you become anxious about what's going to happen. You can become hyper vigilant because you're trying to prevent things from happening. And so you just automatically as soon as you feel like something's about to trigger and the peace is about to be destroyed, your anxiety goes up and you become hyper vigilant and trying to prevent that from happening because you have to keep the peace, right? I don't know if you ever experienced that, but if you have, just put it in a comment like, I know what you're talking about, girl. But not even that, you don't just experience anxiety, you start experiencing bitterness. You become bitter because you're feeling ignored. You're feeling like, what's the use? You become angry and you start resenting the very ones or things that's causing that false sense of peace to steady being cracked, to steady being cracked. Me and my speech. So it's all good. But y'all get what I'm saying, right? All right, so. And then you don't even realize that your relationship, whatever it is, whether it's a relationship with a coworker or a friendship, some relationship with a family member, a relationship with a romantic partner, it becomes one-sided because it's no longer about what it really means to you to have peace. It's about keeping peace. And so to keep peace, you start appeasing that thing or that person that is disrupting that peace. So peacekeeping. Yeah. Then because you're appeasing and you're feeling resentful, you're feeling anxious, you're feeling bitter and angry, you start feeling drained in those interactions with those people or in those environments. You start feeling drained. And you know, hopefully this is for those that are, you know, may not be sure, am I a peacekeeper or a peacemaker? Maybe there's a light bulb coming on in your head right now and you're like, oh my God, that is me. I think that's me, or I'm still trying to decipher, but hopefully this is, you know, got the wheels of your mind turning here. The biggest one of all, you start neglecting your own needs. You become that person that puts you on the back burner. That martyr for peacekeeper's sake. Yep. That's what happens. That's what happens. I don't know about you. When I started learning this stuff and reading through this thing, I was like, oh, that's a lot. That's a lot to come to terms with, a lot to handle, because it takes some self-inventory and some accountability on our part, because it shows that we have some responsibilities in that area. We can't blame what's happening in our environment on the other person. This is saying that there's some, like I said, there's some us in there that got to do some things, right? So if you haven't gathered anything else from what I just shared, know that peacekeeping was never, the intention of peacekeeping was never intended for it to be long-term use, okay? Never intended to be used long-term when it comes to trying to solve conflicts. Now I got to throw my scripture in here. We're still sticking with Matthew chapter 5, verse 9. And it says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. That's Matthew 5 and 9. So, not blessed are the peacekeepers, but blessed are the peacemakers. See, peacemakers, to be a peacemaker, it requires you to operate in truth. And sometimes operating in truth is not easy. It's not. I'm not saying what I heard. I'm saying what I know, okay? Peacekeepers, they don't shy away, but they're willing to address the real issue in the room. Oh. Being a peacemaker takes effort. It's hard. It's hard to do. It's hard to do. And we'll explore peacemaking more as we go over the week. But I want to go back. Like I said before, peacekeeping in itself is not a negative thing. It's definitely not. Even when it comes to our relationships and things like that, it's not a negative thing. Because peacekeeping is actually a step or a pause that's needed sometimes before we begin our peacemaker role. And what I mean by that is, if we didn't take that pause to say, hey, you know what? I need to step away. I'm not going to respond right now. Because if I tell you how I feel right now, if I tell you, try to handle this conflict right now, I'm going to say some things and do some things that I can't take back. And it's going to create more chaos than anything. So it's needful. It's needful to have that temporary fix and pause for the moment. But eventually, you got to pick up that sword or whatever we want to say, or that hat and become the peacemaker. You got to eventually step into the role of the peacemaker. You can't leave it at peacekeeping. So like I said, over the course of this next 6 days now, we're going to explore more what it is to be a peacemaker. We're going to talk about how peacekeeping, how it affects those around us, and what it can turn us into. There's a term called being an enabler. And I want to hit on that a little bit because just in case you're not convinced that peacekeeping is not the way to go, I think after we talk about how peacekeeping and enabling coincide with one another, I may change your mind a little bit. But until then, here's some food for thought that I want you to consider. I know a lot of you guys have heard the saying that I'm just trying to protect my peace, sis. Bro, I'm just trying to protect my peace, right? And it sounds good, and we do need to protect our peace, right? But in hearing what I shared today, here's a reflection question that I really want you to take an honest inventory on. Are you really protecting your peace, or are you just avoiding conflict? Are you really protecting your peace, as you say, or are you just avoiding conflict? Because there is a difference. Okay. And lastly, if there's anything that you heard in this morning fuel with the driver that resonated with you and you want to share, by all means, put it in the comments. Maybe there's an area where you say, you know what, Danessa, I think I've been peacekeeping. And you want to I've been peacekeeping in this area. Or maybe you just want to say, hey, sis, I'm not quite sure if I fit the role of the peacekeeper yet, or maybe I need to hear a little bit more about what a peacemaker is. Just say, hey, you know what? I'm learning the difference right now. But I would love to hear from you. Also, you can always catch the replays of my Morning Fuel with the Driver series, as well as other podcast videos that I've done on my YouTube channel called Navigating Life with the Driver. If you just go to YouTube and put @Journey with the Driver in the search box, it'll bring me up. I would love to have you as a subscriber. I would love to have you take a look at the videos. I believe that information is helpful to everyday life. I'm always open to feedback and things like that, but that's it. And thank you for tuning in. Love you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow.
I gotta find peace of mind.